We live in a world that's seeking a distraction, a diversion from the everyday activities of life. Reality seems broken to us, and our lives lack depth. And we're all seeking something beyond ourselves. Some seek excitement, some seek adventure or thrills. But what is the need for this distraction? It is because we are burdened. We are burdened with boredom, with guilt, fear, doubt, poverty, and hunger. We seek rest from these burdens, and so we escape into any other world we can. Drugs, money, violence, crime, music, movies, games, anything to make us forget our present pain. But the world has a real problem. Not only is it filled with guilt, fear, and doubt, and boredom, but there are people that want to make money off of the fact that you are not in control. Your pain, your bad health. For your boredom, they want to sell you video games. But beneath the noise and clamor, a still, small voice. A voice that says, "Come, come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." But the one solution to our problems becomes lost, and the voice of a loving God gets drowned out in the voice of people who poorly misrepresent him, and in the voice of those who would take his place. Could media, even interactive media, be allowing false gods and the occult into our homes? Gods to replace the one true God? How about video games? Could they be involved in this as well? Video games. A multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry that offer photorealistic worlds you can interact with and manipulate. You can be the hero and save the world, or, in some games, you can be the villain and destroy it. And although Nintendo did not invent the video game, that's where we'll begin. Video games did not come onto the scene until the 1960s, but Nintendo is actually older than video games. They actually got their start making gambling cards fashioned after 15th century European gambling cards. But how would European cards ever find their way to Japan? Well, in the 15th century, Portugal was the native home of a popular style of playing cards, dragon cards. These were forerunners to our modern playing card deck, and they have the same foundation as the tarot cards, with the suits, swords, cups, clubs, and coins. These are the same suits that eventually became the suits in our modern playing cards: spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds. Often these cards were used in gambling, not much unlike our modern playing card deck. Sir Francis Xavier, a Portuguese priest for the Catholic Church, inadvertently is responsible for bringing gambling to Japan. In August of 1549, Sir Francis Xavier came as a missionary to Kagoshima, Japan, in the name of a group for which he was a co-founder, the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. The men on his ship brought their Portuguese dragon cards along with them on the voyage, and were all too eager to teach the native Japanese not only how to play, but how to gamble as well. As gambling spread, the Japanese government outlawed the act of private gambling. Thus, the people had to change their cards if they were going to keep them, and so they came up with the whimsical and colorful flower designs of the Hanafuda cards. 340 years later, Nintendo began to mass-produce these same cards, and these became Nintendo's main source of income for almost 100 years. Nintendo literally owes their business to none other than Sir Francis Xavier, the same man that suggested there should be an Inquisition. If this Jesuit priest had not accidentally brought gambling to Japan, Nintendo could never have existed. On September 23, 1889, Fusajiro Yamauchi founded a small company called Nintendo Koppai, or the Nintendo Playing Card Company. Nintendo is a Japanese word that could be roughly translated, "It comes from heaven." Nintendo's first venture was making handmade Hanafuda cards, but over time, this expanded into a line of vacuum cleaners, even into a taxicab service, a love hotel chain, and toys similar to this love tester from 1978. But their success didn't begin until Shigeru Miyamoto, an engineer by trade, made his first game for Nintendo in the 1970s, Donkey Kong.
It's kind of like filmmaking, where there's certain rules of editing and composition, and you have to go back to the early filmmakers, like D.W. Griffith or later Orson Welles, to find the guys who really made those rules that we all follow today. In video games, the guy who's responsible for all this is Shigeru Miyamoto.
Shigeru Miyamoto was hired by Nintendo in 1977. They hired him to design the artwork that goes on the side of game cabinets.
Yeah, he worked as a staff artist. He's intellectually curious, always seeing what was going on. And then in 1979, he actually had his first shot at designing a game.
At this point, Nintendo's trying to break into America, and so they try to do this with a game called Radar Scope. Now, it didn't go over so well, so they ended up having like a few thousand of these cabinets left.
So, in desperation, they looked at this, young artist and said, hey, you know what, you want to make a game? We got all these Radar Scope machines. See what you can do. We got nothing else to lose.
Take all these Radar Scope parts, we got the cabinets, the joysticks, the screens, just reprogram them, make your own game, let's see what happens.
So, Miyamoto gets to work, and out comes Donkey Kong.
Not only was Donkey Kong a runaway success, it also introduced to the world Nintendo's first superstar character, Super Mario.
Mario! Mario!
As popularity of Nintendo increased, it spread all across America. Now, when Nintendo releases a new game, people of all ages, from all over the world, are all too eager to run to the store to buy it. What began as nothing more than a hobby has become a worldwide obsession. The handmade Hanafuda cards made by Nintendo can be traced back to the dragon cards from Portugal, which can in turn be traced back to a very early form of the tarot card deck. Called by names like the Devil's Bible and the Devil's Picture Book, tarot cards are common among occultists and spiritualists. Tarot cards are most famous for fortune-telling, and what we currently call the modern playing deck of cards actually is derived from these cards. As stated before, common playing cards have 4 suits: spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds, and all of these suits can be found in an earlier form in the tarot card deck. These are cups, wands, pentacles, and swords, which are also a modified form of the suits found in the dragon cards deck. Although playing cards have gained wide acceptance as an innocent game, they can still be used as tools of divination, as seen in this Michael Vubel painting, The Fortune Teller. And not only are modern playing cards usable for divination, even the cards Nintendo makes, the Hanafuda cards, can be used for divination as well.
Were a gift to me by my cousin. They are from Korea, although their origins are Japanese. These little tiny cards come in a nice hard case. They are made of hard plastic, which is quite different to me than using tarot, which are typically made of paper. So the Hanafuda cards are most popularly used as a gambling game, but they can also be used for divination or fortune-telling.
Deuteronomy 18:10-12 is very clear on this issue. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or spiritist, or one who calls up the dead, For all who do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. You see, it's quite easy to take something occult like the tarot cards, and over time modify them until they gain acceptance. Is it possible that modern games could have links to the occult as well? Perhaps, just like the tarot cards, something occult is slipping into our homes, completely unnoticed. It was so easy for the tarot cards to find entrance into our homes, from an occult deck of cards to the modern-day playing deck cards. Would you really be surprised if the same thing didn't happen with the digital games of our time? History repeats itself. That which has been is what will be. That which has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 1:9. We should not be surprised to find that the exact same thing that happened in the past will happen again in the future. So does Nintendo have a policy on religion? Well, in the 90s, Nintendo would censor games based on this list of 10 rules. It's the closest thing that can be found to a policy on religion. Rule number 7 is very clear about what Nintendo games could portray. It says, must not reflect ethnic, religious, nationalistic, or sexual stereotypes of language. This includes symbols that are related to any type of racial, religious, nationalistic, or ethnic groups such as crosses, pentagrams, God, gods, Satan, hell, Buddha. Nintendo was very clear that they did not want to insult any religious group, and they were very careful about what they would allow into any Nintendo games. So here's an example of Nintendo censorship. Can you guess what's been removed? The Japanese original of this game actually had a cross on the sign for the hospital. And this Disney game has been censored by having the crosses removed from the coffins. Notice this church steeple. In the Japanese original, there used to be a cross. And in this church interior, the stained glass window also used to be a cross. But Nintendo hasn't always followed by their own rules. You'd think from this that Nintendo had no intention of including religion in their games at all. But then one day, that changed forever.
Sold separately. Now you're playing with power.
In 1986, Nintendo unveiled The Legend of Zelda, which took these same rules and threw them out the window. Notice that the main character has a cross on his shield similar to a medieval crusader. Why was this cross not censored? Perhaps Nintendo was not afraid of religious content after all. In fact, the religious content of this game doesn't end there. Notice that among the hero's loot, there is a yellow book. What is that book? The game's instruction booklet actually has the answer. It says, this is the wand that Wizrobe uses. Wave it to let loose magic spells. What's more, if Link picks up the magic book and learns some new spells, he can chant some fiery spells and send out flames. As you can see, in English, this book is titled The Magic Book, but the original Japanese title was the Bible. But could The Legend of Zelda be subtly attempting to reduce the Bible to an occult book of magic? The official Nintendo statement is that The Legend of Zelda is based on fantasy, and that all of the religious content in the game has no basis in reality. But if that's true, why does official Nintendo artwork depict the main character praying before Jesus Christ on a crucifix? Perhaps there's more beneath the surface in Nintendo's games than they let on. Nintendo is in a large regard one of the most influential game companies in the world. While there are other companies like Sony and Microsoft, even these companies got their start by copying the successes of Nintendo. In the investigation of the influences these games have on the person playing them, it's very valuable to have insider information on the inspiration behind the games. Very rarely will Nintendo ever discuss direct inspiration for their games, but in one instance, an interview on Nintendo's own website, Wii.com, Shigeru Miyamoto decided to explain the genesis of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise. Having rigorously analyzed what exactly made people want to play one more time, I sketched out the idea for 5 games. At this point, Nintendo was the licensee for Popeye. I asked if I could make a game using Popeye. The basic concept of Popeye is that there is the hero and his rival, who he manages to turn the tables on with the aid of spinach. It's identical to Pac-Man. This basically boils down to Mario being a replacement for Popeye. Mario was intended to be Popeye at one point, but it just didn't work out for whatever reason. Mario is Popeye and Pac-Man, but repackaged. This chart should illustrate this clearly. In each of these 3 stories, there is a hero, a female lead character, and a weapon that the hero uses to destroy the enemy. Popeye saves olive oil with spinach from Bluto. This spinach gives Popeye superhuman or almost godlike strength. In fact, it seems that there's nothing Popeye can't do when he eats spinach. Pac-Man also follows the same pattern, and somehow by eating power pellets, he is given almost superhuman or godlike strength to defeat ghosts. Once again, a godlike power. Mario saves a princess with a mushroom from a dragon. Now notice that all of these weapons are essentially something that A, gives the hero superhuman or godlike qualities, and B, are items that the character must put within themselves. In this case, all of them are food. This is food that makes you into a god. But wasn't there a place in the Bible where a serpent said that if someone ate a piece of fruit, they would be like God? Yes, that's exactly what happened. In Genesis, the deceiving serpent told Eve if she ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she would become like God. Because Eve doubted God, humanity had to be separated from their home in Eden and from the direct presence of God. Because they fell for his trick, evil came upon this world, all because he convinced Eve to eat a piece of fruit, and that fruit could transform her into a god. But these stories come from the angle that eating fruit that turns you into a god is good, just like Gnosticism, which teaches that the serpent saved us from God with an apple. Nintendo is probably best known for their 3 biggest franchises: Super Mario Bros., a game in a fantasy world; The Legend of Zelda, a medieval game of swords and sorcery; and Metroid, a game in a world of science fiction. The first game we'll be evaluating is Metroid Other M, a science fiction odyssey that takes place in the far distant future. It surrounds a character named Samus, who is a female bounty hunter. As the story begins, the main character finds herself suspended mid-air by a creature called a Metroid. This baby Metroid thinks that the main character is its mother. Thinking that its mother is in danger, it sacrificially gives its life to save her. Later, the main character reminisces of this baby creature as if it was her own child.
Even a fragment. None of the baby remained on me. I knew it to be true, but still couldn't help looking at my palm for a sign. Never again would I encounter the baby. Never.
The location where this story takes place is called the Bottle Ship. It's a space station that's literally shaped like a baby bottle. Notice the similarity between this bottle ship and an actual baby bottle. So then the question becomes, what baby is being alluded to? Let's briefly recap and see if you notice any motherhood symbolism. As the game begins, the first thing you see is a fetus. The next thing we see is a baby creature confusing the main character for its mother. Then we discover that the monster that kills the baby is named Mother.
Thanks to the hyper beam, which was given to me somehow by the baby, I laid Mother Brain to waste.
And the events of this game take place on a bottle ship, which is probably a joke reference to the name Mothership. And if we rearrange the letters in the word Other M, we find out that it spells mother. But that's not all. If you take the first letter of each word, it spells the word mom. So what sort of baby is this game alluding to raising? The answer may surprise you. As the player investigates the bottle ship, they find a baby of a different nature. Timid and frightened, this baby scampers away because it's unable to defend itself, only to reappear later as something infinitely more sinister. It may look cute and adorable, but what you don't know is that this little creature will one day grow up to be a symbol of the devil. Later, we discover that it's less like a cute fuzzy baby and more like a serpent. And as it gets older, the baby sheds its skin like a snake does.
An empty shell.
And the baby continues to get larger. In a hellish landscape of molten lava and fire all around you is where we see this serpent once again. And finally we see the serpent for what it really is. This serpent all along has been Ridley, the devil personified as a horned dragon. The baby is all grown up. Isn't it amazing how similar this is to the imagery in the Bible in the book of Revelation, where it also speaks of a mother in outer space who's attacked by a dragon? And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. A mother attacked by a fiery red dragon in outer space? It's a counterfeit of what happens in the Bible in the book of Revelation. And did you notice that this red dragon originally was a serpent in a garden that ate fruit? Just like a certain serpent in the book of Genesis that eventually grows up to become the dragon of the book of Revelation. And did I mention that the main character has a father figure named Adam?
Confession time. Because I was so young when I lost both of my parents, there's no question I saw Adam as a father figure.
So what influences Nintendo to put spiritual content in their games, like this human sacrifice in The Legend of Zelda? More importantly, is this spiritual content intentionally placed there? Possibly not. But isn't it disturbing that these references could find their way into a game by accident? Does it really matter how it got into the game? But could a spiritual reference just fall off of their shelf into the game? While I highly doubt that that's possible, maybe. But pay attention, and you'll see just how much is placed there on purpose. Does anything spiritually influence these game makers?
It's not easy to escape from the humdrum everyday world. I often get bogged down in it. But there's a shrine near here dedicated to a fox god, and this fox god can fly. So I had the idea of making a fox that could fly through arches.
As Mr. Miyamoto said, sometimes, to relax from the constant activities of life, he would visit the shrine of Inari. Inari is the Shinto god of rice, a staple food of the Japanese diet. Thus, he is a very important god in the Shinto pantheon. Inari has a fox god named Kitsune, who is his messenger to humanity. Think of Kitsune as the bridge that connected humanity to Inari. Mr. Miyamoto confesses that Shintoism and its gods influence some of his games. Idolatry is the practice of giving worship to any living or non-living matter, such as stone, gold, silver, or even more abstract ideas like the spirit of a tree. Also, the practice of idolatry is not merely limited to bowing down to pray. In Revelation 5:12, we're given an image of what worship can be. The angels of God are surrounding God's throne, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power, and riches, and wisdom, and strength, and honor, and glory, and blessing." 7 types of worship are listed here. You can worship anything or any concept, including a game, by giving it your riches, your wisdom, your strength. If an idol can be made out of anything, including stone, gold, silver, or abstract ideas like a tree or the spirit of a flower, or even the spirit of the sun, as the Egyptians used to worship, then there is no rule saying that the pixels on your computer screen, or your television, or your Facebook, or your Farmville account cannot become an idol as well. So Nintendo can take old idols and ancient gods that don't receive the same amount of worship that they used to, and repackage them as something like a cartoon, and people everywhere are completely oblivious. Just like the tarot cards, objects of ancient worship, finding their way into your home. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. But if we should flee from the occult and from idolatry, where should we flee to? Flee to Jesus, the one who wants to give us rest from our burdens of boredom and guilt, fear and doubt. Kitsune is a shape-shifting, flying, multi-tailed fox god. The more tails that a kitsune has, the more power it can have. It can have as few as 1, or as many as 9 tails, and its mischievous nature would often lead it to shape-shift into other forms to trick people. This kitsune has disguised itself as a woman, but even in its disguised form, it casts the shadow of a fox on the wall. Shigeru Miyamoto claims this same god inspired his game Star Fox, a science fiction game loosely based on this same god. Notice that the main character even has a red scarf like the real idol. Also note that the game box art has an idol-like figurine to represent this fox. It's paying an homage to the idol who inspired it. The ancient Greeks also had a messenger god who had a mischievous nature named Hermes, the winged god of speed. Symbolized by the wings on his feet, he bore messages from the gods of Mount Olympus to humanity. And similar to Kitsune, he was the one that allowed communication with the gods. Bear in mind that wings are not only a symbol of flight, but also a symbol of speed. The caduceus, a stick with wings and intertwining serpents, originated with Hermes, and has been accepted by our hospitals as one of its emblems. What if there was a game that combined the Shinto messenger god of flight, Kitsune, and the Greek messenger god of speed, Hermes? Kitsune, a fox that can fly, and Hermes, the god of speed, and stylize them into a cartoonish version of these gods. And yet this sounds so strikingly similar to a game called Sonic the Hedgehog. There's Sonic, an anthropomorphized hedgehog known for his speed and semi-mischievous attitude, and Tails, a kitsune fox with 2 tails that can fly. There are other games that have used kitsune foxes as well. In The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, there is a 3-tailed kitsune fox. Pokemon not only has kitsune foxes in the game, but has many other possible homages to Shinto gods beyond that. The next game we'll evaluate is the Legend of Zelda series, which has even more beneath the surface. It all begins with this symbol. These 3 triangles were often referred to as the 3 dragon scales, and are the family crest of the Hojo clan from Japan's ancient past. The symbol of this family is very famous and can be found all over Japan. It's on altars, street signs, and more, and is easily recognized to many natives to Japan. This symbol is borrowed in The Legend of Zelda, where its name has been changed to the Triforce. In discussing the name of his title character, Mr. Miyamoto has said, Zelda was the name of the wife of the famous novelist F. Scott Fitzgerald. She was a famous and beautiful woman from all accounts, and I liked the sound of her name, so I took the liberty of using her name for the very first Zelda title. The story of the real-life Zelda was one of shattered dreams and tragedy. Mrs. Fitzgerald died a tragic death in 1948 when the hospital she was admitted to caught fire. Fashioned after this, The Legend of Zelda places the beautiful Zelda as a woman in constant tragedy, waiting for her knight in shining armor to save her. Aside from secular references, The Legend of Zelda is also filled with Shintoism. So much so, in fact, that it's like a primer to teach the basics of Shintoism. But what are the basics?
Shinto is the native religion of Japan, but religion can be a slightly misleading word when applied to Shinto. While it may have many customs and ceremonies passed down the centuries, Shinto can in many ways be seen as an embodiment of Japanese culture into a series of beliefs. One of these beliefs is in a variety of gods or spirits inhabiting the natural world called kami. Natural forces like wind and fire, objects and places in nature, and even people of great respect can all be called kami. Earliest records of Japan come from the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. In them, the mythology, history, and origins of the Japanese islands are outlined. Before the heavens and the earth came into existence, all was chaos, limitless and without definite shape or form. Eon followed eon. Then, out of this boundless, shapeless mass, something light and transparent rose up and formed the heaven. This was the high plane of heaven, in which materialized the three divine beings, called the three creating deities. Many gods were thus born in succession, and so they increased in number. But as long as the world remained in a chaotic state, there was nothing for them to do. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, is perhaps most important. It was Amaterasu who was the grandmother of the first emperor, Jimmu. It is also from Amaterasu that the imperial family received the imperial regalia of Japan, also known as the three sacred treasures of Japan, which consist of the sword, kusanagi, the mirror, yata no kagami, and the jewel, isakani no magatama. The regalia represent the three primary virtues: valor, the sword; wisdom, the mirror; and benevolence, the jewel.
So Shintoism states that the creation of the world was the responsibility of three gods called kami, and that there are three relics. First, a sacred sword representing the virtue of power. Second, a sacred mirror representing the virtue of wisdom. And third, a curved jewel representing benevolence. The ruler of Japan needed all three relics to be the emperor. Similarly, the fictional religion within The Legend of Zelda has the known world being created by three golden goddesses. The Legend of Zelda has three virtues attributed to these three golden triangles, the same ones from Shintoism: power, wisdom, and courage. And these three virtues, if you can obtain them, will allow you to rule the world. As in Shintoism, having these three virtues allows you to be emperor. And as Shintoism has three relics, or regalia, The Legend of Zelda has the same three relics, and the object of the game is to collect them all. First, the Master Sword, a sacred sword. Second, the Mirror Shield, a sacred mirror. And then there are many curved jewels that you collect throughout the game. The story of the franchise takes the player from one temple to the next, each temple containing a demigod that must be defeated. The object of the games in this franchise is to obtain the power of the gods and use it to defeat your enemy. Did you notice the symbol on the mirror shield? That is the crescent moon and star, the symbol of Islam. It can be found all over the place in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Could The Legend of Zelda be subtly placing subliminal Muslim themes in their games? Don't be shocked, but they have. Nintendo went as far as to include a subliminal Muslim prayer in the middle of their game, in the Fire Temple, no less. In recent re-releases of this game, they have removed all references to Islam because too many people were offended. This Muslim prayer is the Allah Akbar, sometimes called the Takbir, which translate to God is greatest, or God is great. When you seek out the meaning of this, you find on Muslim websites that they believe that God's greatness is one reason why they don't believe Jesus died on the cross. But it doesn't end there. The Legend of Zelda has gone so far as to include cartoon depictions of human sacrifice in their games. Remember, this is supposed to be a game for children. Why does Nintendo feel so compelled to make the player commit idolatry? 1 Corinthians 10:7 says, "And do not become idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." The play we become involved in can be idolatry. It seems like every one of these games offers you a hero to distract us from the true God. From every angle, it's as if God is under attack. This is the same God that sent his Son from his throne in heaven to our world. But there is another man who comes from heaven just like Jesus to save the world. Jesus began as a carpenter, but Mario also began as a carpenter.
Nintendo's Super Mario jumped onto our screens in 1985 and in doing so set off a video gaming revolution. He was modeled after a real person. The little plumber was patterned after a carpenter turned developer from Washington State.
Jesus performed miracles that no one had ever seen before. Mario also performs miracles like flying and turning into animals. In Revelation, his people are represented by a woman wearing a crown who is attacked by a fiery red dragon. The object of Mario's affection, similarly, is also a woman wearing a crown who is attacked by a fire-breathing dragon. The dragon that attacks Jesus' bride is named Satan, the old serpent. And Nintendo has named the dragon that attacks Mario's princess, Koopa, the great demon king. Is Mario nothing more than a Roman former carpenter? Or a counterfeit Christ? Nintendo's one desire is that everyone invites him into their homes, into their hearts. Except that while Jesus came to magnify the Word of God, Mario doesn't seem to care so much. In fact, Nintendo seems to make fun of the Word of God more than anything.
Plumber's Log, number 1000 BC. We've arrived in Pyramid Land, where we've heard the mushroom people were in real trouble. King Koopa had appointed himself pharaoh and was forcing everyone to live by a set of evil laws.
Look! It's Koopa's 10 Coopmandments! Coopmandment number 1. Thou shalt give Koop Pot all your gold coins.
Coopmandment number 2. Thou shalt hire no plumbers.
Mamma mia, look at Coopmandment number 6. Thou shalt eat no pasta. This time, that crummy Koopa's gone too far.
Come on! We've got to free the mushroom people from Koopa's terrible Coopmandments!
And Nintendo is not afraid of bringing out Mario's Shinto side either. In the third Mario game, Mario can even turn into a Shinto god. Tanuki, the magic shape-shifting dog. He was the god of boozing, restaurateurs, and gluttony. Tanuki idols can be found all over Japan, beckoning customers into bars and restaurants. In the instruction manual to Super Mario Bros. 3, it describes Mario's ability to turn into Tanuki. Tanuki Mario can turn into a statue for a short period of time. While Mario is a statue, he cannot be harmed. And this is one of literally hundreds of ways that Mario can gain godlike power, from throwing fireballs from his hands, to flying, to turning into animals, and much more. But what makes God different from an idol? Isaiah 46:9-10 says, "Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is none else. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done." The thing that makes the God of the Bible so spectacular is Jesus, and how the Bible so amazingly predicted his entire life, death and ministry, and resurrection ages before it took place. For example, I am a reproach of men and despised of the people. They part my garments among them, and cast lots upon my vesture. They pierced my hands and my feet. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? These are not just some of Jesus' final words during his execution. All of these statements were predicted 1,000 years before Jesus was even born, and every single one of them happened exactly as prophesied. Even the fact that he would be betrayed by a friend. Yea, mine own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me. And that he would be resurrected from the dead. For thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. And this is not even skimming the surface of the total number of prophecies in the Bible. A brief example is Cyrus, a Persian king who lived in 600 BC, whose name and events surrounding his life were predicted 100 years prior to his birth. The ancient historian Josephus Flavius records that Cyrus the Great stated the following: "Since God Almighty hath appointed me to be king of the habitable earth, I believe that he is that God which the nation of the Israelites worship, for indeed he foretold my name by the prophets." Even Cyrus himself had been amazed that he had been named before birth by the prophets. So you can see why it's important when Jesus told us not to be deceived by false prophets and false Christs. In Matthew 24:24 he says, "For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect." A false Christ could be anyone that impersonates the real Jesus or his mission. The most important prophecy could be the one in Revelation that says that Jesus will one day save a woman wearing a crown, a symbol of his church, from the dragon named Satan. Well, Mario is also a prophesied hero. In Super Paper Mario, it is revealed that in the Mario game world there is a book of prophecy called the Light Prognosticus, which predicts that one day a hero would come and save the world. That hero just happens to be Mario. So Mario is more than just a former carpenter turned plumber who saves a princess and fights a dragon. He's also prophesied as the coming one to save the world. Well, what about The Legend of Zelda? In that game series, it is revealed that Zelda is a prophet, to whom it is revealed in vision that a boy from the forest in green would also appear to save the world. This boy also saves a princess from a king of demons, but he also happens to be the prophesied coming one who will save the world. And Metroid? Metroid is the same. In a game called Metroid Prime, the game script contained the following text: "The prophecies tell of the coming of the worm." The prophecies also speak of the great defender, the one who will deliver the world from evil. She comes dressed for war, and her wrath is terrible. Do our eyes look forward, seeing the hatchling as she once was? Or does she approach even now, arriving in our race's last hour, a savior, clothed in machines crafted long ago? This woman is not just a mother-like figure attacked by a dragon in outer space. She is a prophesied savior, predicted as a hero to save the world fallen into darkness. Nintendo's 3 biggest stories, and 3 prophesied heroes, and they all fight either a dragon or a king of demons. Jesus himself knew this was coming. He knew that one day this would happen. Counterfeits of Jesus are being offered to the world as a distraction from the truth. And you don't have to bow down to pray to them to worship them. If you remember, Revelation 5:12 taught us there was more to worship than just bowing down to pray. You just have to give them some of your power, your money and resources, your memory and thinking, your strength and energy. Any of these are enough. Jesus was right. Many have been deceived. But the real Jesus offers healing from all of our ailments, even this one, freely and without price. And he begins with this: "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Is it your desire to respond to the call of the Savior? Won't you turn to Jesus and find rest for your souls?